we go. I love your hair.
Thank you.
I need to do something like that with mine.
That would make things very interesting for you, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, this rat tail's just too much, man.
Yeah. It
But,
suits you.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, there's some people coming in. We got 5 people in. Let's give it another 30 seconds or so.
Brilliant.
All right. We got 3 shows today. And if they're anything like yesterday, I'll be on my back in between shows trying to integrate all the activations during the show.
Fantastic.
We've got a new friend I've never met. We just had a few words. I've been to her page. Her name is Tash, Mitch. And top of her page, Life and Business, Energy Alchemist, Intuitive Healer, NLP, Hypnotherapy, Yoga, EFT. So it sounds like, first of all, let me say thank you for coming in and sharing space with us and honoring us with your presence.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And yeah, I can tell by looking at your energy before I read those words, you know, when I was going down your page, that you've looked like you've been involved in these things that you're doing for quite some time.
Yeah, I have. I mean, my grandma, I always give onus to my grandmother. So where she is in whatever dimension she is at the moment, she always gets a knock on the door because it was like, there's me going, it was because of you. But basically, you know, she was a mystic. She was an energy worker in her own right. She was highly intuitive. She made the world of soulful work seem very, very normal. She made it seem very normal, but you know, now when I look back at it, she was just doing what her soul was guiding her to do. But it was a very lonely path that she took, because I didn't see anybody around her that looked remotely like her, you know. But she held that banner really strongly. So for me, I always had her as an example of what it means to walk a spiritual path, and to do it in the normality of your life, you know. So it's always been with me, basically.
And was that in Grenada? Was she in Grenada?
She was in Trinidad. She was in Trinidad. She was very much, like I say, she was very much a maverick. She wasn't afraid to stand alone. She wasn't afraid to have a very clear but very different voice. She just wasn't afraid to walk her path, you know. So she showed me an example. I wasn't as badass as her, so it took me a while to integrate all of that. You know, it took me a while to come into, and also her path wasn't necessarily my path, and she made that very, very clear very early on.
So she was teaching you. She was teaching you from an early age.
Yeah, I would say I was an apprentice of hers of sorts, because she was basically my major influence in terms of a spiritual path. Because of how she held that space and how much presence she had in that space, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember watching some videos of Dick Gregory, the activist, comedian, and so on, and in his later years. And I remember him saying that the most powerful, and this is more of an energetic, the reason I'm saying it, he said the most powerful force in America, and when I consider America, the whole North American, Central American, you know, and he said is the Black woman, the spiritual Black woman. And last night I was watching some videos, just, you know, processing stuff, and I was watching a 30-minute doc on Bo Jackson. And I love Bo Jackson. I just think he's an incredible person, but I didn't know the influence and the power that his mother had on him. I think he was one of 11 kids. He was a badass, and he was getting in trouble, and she just kept him in line. And there was a funny story. Him and his friends were throwing rocks at a bunch of hogs on a hog farm, and they killed a few of them. And the cops came and they took him. I don't know how old he was. He must have been like 14 or something. And they took him to the house, and the mother said, "Take him to jail. I'm not paying anything, especially since he didn't bring one of the hogs home."
Yeah.
But the power of the mother in particular,
Yeah.
more, and I say that more than even people talk about the divine feminine, but the power of the mother that has never, that has always been there. That's what I was looking at last night. I thought, here's a story about this man, but behind that story is her. And he even said, "I would be nothing without her." So that's an incredible story about your grandmother. So what kind of stuff was she teaching you? Was she teaching you tarot or herbs, or what was going on with that?
She gave me her my first deck of tarot cards, but she used to do these talismans, so these kind of like spiritual sort of yeah. It was mainly like Hebrew language that she used to sort of do these kind of like magical amulet things. Wow. And so it was things like that, her thing was very much around the energetics. Yeah. And it was around, she was doing all of this in times when nobody knew what chakra was, even me, I didn't have language for chakra, that kind of thing. Like basically we didn't have the language of energetics and metaphysical sort of, the metaphysical nature of stuff at that point, or certainly not as a
well, there's a lag. I wasn't interested. I was going to say, was this coming from her innate knowing and or oral tradition, stuff?
It was coming from her innate knowing, and it was coming from her soul. And I can say that for sure now, because when I say to you, there wasn't a lot that was reflecting her in her environment. She was an orphan, and not early on. So by the time she got to 18, she had absolutely no family whatsoever. Wow. And so as a result, the path that she forged was definitely her path. She didn't ask anyone's permission for anything. Neither did she take a job, because she knew what her temper was like. So like literally she became a businesswoman early on, and her thing was to forge my own path, because the only person I can rely on is myself. But that then was kind of replicated in her environment. And I think going in, we all have our stories of how intuition maybe got developed. When I feel into her story, it was very much, it got developed because it was a necessity for her as an operating system, And then as she grew older, because it got developed at such a young age, and she lived till she was near enough 100. As she grew older, that just sharpened and sharpened and sharpened, basically. So by the time I came to her, which was, when I started developing a fascination with what she was doing, she was probably edging towards sort of like, her late 60s, early 70s. At that point, her intuition was like a fine-tuned mechanism. It was a real source of fascination for me. How she could see behind her, and how she could hear conversations that were like 2 doors down, things like that, It was a real source of fascination to me. But what she was showing me wasn't necessarily something that was a gift that she had that nobody else could have. What she was showing me is our innate gifts as humans. Wow. But it was also, she was showing that to me from a point of view of necessity honed this diamond, and now she was using it in all of these kinds of ways,
Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Now, was her business, was it related to this type of stuff, or was it something different?
It was something different. So she lived in Trinidad, and she would go over to Venezuela. At the time, Venezuela was nowhere near having the problems is having now. It was quite a wealthy country at that point. Yeah. And she would go to things like, she would go to the diamond mines and actually get diamonds and bring it back to Trinidad. She was kind of like a merchant seller, I'd say it like that. She would look at.
She used her gifts to.
Yeah. Very much so.
Expand her
very
business.
much so. Very much so. And she could read people very easily. So she used those gifts to actually figure out what was needed and to actually supply, supply the demands, let's say it like that.
Wow. I got a lot of questions. So, A, have you been able to connect with her? And B, did she have any specific divine essences kind of guiding her? Did she ever mention that there
No,
were any particular, you know?
no, but she spoke what I know now is light language.
Okay.
She spoke that she would call it speaking in tongues. And the development that I've had with vibrational language has made me understand what she was doing a lot more. But her directive was coming from soul. It was coming from soul. She didn't, she never mentioned any guides or anything like that. It was definitely soul that was her guiding force.
Are you able to connect with her, do you feel?
She's never left. That's what I was saying to you. It's like basically, I always give onus to her at the start of any conversation when I'm asked where did this come from, and every time I do that, I knock on her door and she's present. You know what I mean? So yeah, she's not left. I feel her presence very, very often. I feel that she's not tethered to this plane anymore. So the only time she comes through is if there's something that's made her curious, or if she's kind of the door has been knocked,
Right. Yeah.
But when there was a sense of when she left, she definitely left.
I'm sure she did. I'm sure it was the coronation.
Yeah.
And so you're from Trinidad, and I know you live normally you live in the UK.
Well, my mother was Trinidadian. My dad was from, or is from a country called Grenada, which is where I am at the moment. So I was born in the UK, but I grew up I grew up in Grenada. But I spent some time in Trinidad, and also my grandmother spent time in Grenada. So between those two things was.
How much time have you spent in UK?
Oh gosh, I mean, basically. I left the UK when I was 5 years old. Mm-hmm. We ended up in Saudi for a while. And then I came to Grenada when I was 7. And then from 7 to 17, I was in Grenada. And then at 17, I went back to the UK and basically have been there ever since. So, I'm off and on. I would kind of like come out, but mostly I've been in the UK basically.
You've been a lot of places. So what's it like to interact with people in regard to the gifts that you have and share? Being in, say, Grenada, Saudi Arabia, as opposed to the UK. Is there a difference when you're in the West, what they call the West? UK?
What can I say? Basically, because there's a sort of flow in terms of the way I relate to what I do. There's a tendency to draw out people who have resonance with that flow. And the people who have resonance with that flow are speaking the language of soul. And I feel that language of soul is a common language. I feel like the way that it expresses itself can be very different. So for example, if I'm speaking to a Celtic sister, it feels very different. Although the drum beat and the language of soul is exactly the same, it presents itself differently. If I'm speaking to somebody who's Indian, it presents itself a bit differently, but the language of soul is exactly the same. So there's a commonality of language of soul, I would say.
Yeah, like a vibration.
Yeah,
like
for
vibration.
Sure. For sure.
I love what you said about your grandmother, and then you just kind of repeated in a different context about yourself. You said that she basically created that, and then everything around her matched that, right?
Yes.
And I think a lot of people are coming into that now, and it's palpable. I mean, people are seeing evidence of if I alter or refine the diamond that I am, those things around me will match. Right?
We're frequency beings, and I feel like we're able to develop a language that allows us to feel and understand that more on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level it's always been running. So we're just coming to what already is, and there's a bit of a magic in it as well, because it's like when you start to really understand yourself as a frequency being, you understand that the frequency you're holding is immediately matched in the world around you, and vice versa, sort of thing.
It's that soul reliance, soul responsibility, that it's never them, it's always me, right? You know?
There is that, but it brings a sense of play to it as well.
Yeah.
You know, you can become very playful in that, and that brings a lot of joy.
Yeah. You see that a lot the last few years since 2012, when these communities started blowing up, because the downloads and the epiphanies are so strong, and the messages are so strong, that you know, anybody that's normal tends to get really serious about it, which is great. But at some point, I think what you're talking about is a really good sign for anyone of balance, relaxation, and therefore a better conduit for the magic. And that's to be able to laugh about it and play with it.
Sure.
You know, that's why comedians live so long. Right?
Yeah. The earth has divinity has a sense of humor. We all know that, right? But the earth energy has a sense of humor as well in it, in the sense that it's a creator, and creative beings at their heart and soul have to know how to play. Because if you don't know how to play, you become stuck in you just become stuck. That's the long and the short of it, right? You become a bit stuck because you become too rigid. So play is a language really of creation, and you know, divinity is creator. So
that's right. I have a friend who's Vietnamese, and her family went to Canada after the Vietnam War, and her father's a very powerful character, just as she is. Anyway, it's a pretty good sized family, and in getting to know her, she talks about how the dragons have always been part of their life as a family. It's been openly discussed, and so on and so on. And it sounds very similar to your upbringing, that this world that we're all getting used to the last few years has been a way of life for you since you were a child.
Yeah, very much so. We all come in with frequencies, don't we? I mean, you know that because you've come in on a strong frequency yourself. You know, you've come in with a particular soul plan that is evident in what you're doing now. We all come in with frequencies. Some of these frequencies are recognized by the people around us. When we're coming in with these kind of spiritual frequencies, a lot of times it isn't. So you feel like really odd in community. You feel like, okay, well, you know, like, why am I so different? Why do I feel so? And it's not always like a really nice, comfortable kind of like, yes, I'm different. I'm amazingly different. You know, it always feels like, oh shit, I've actually gotten the wrong vehicle to get here or something, you know. So then
I made a wrong turn on the cosmic highway. You know, GPS went out.
You know what I mean? Like, what happened here? Like, I obviously got dropped off on the wrong planet or something. And then you've actually literally got to work your way into what resonance is and how you find your points of reflections, you know.
Especially most of the people would, you know, identify with being an empath and learning to deal with all those energies that they may not have had the training, the apprenticeship, you know, and you're like, you know, but I was going to ask you, you know, given that your life experience, and then watching the world, let's just say, 2012, whatever, you know, give or take a year or two, but certainly the last 10 years, there's been a huge, obvious expansion of consciousness, these types of communities, and acceptance into normalcy, what was once abnormal. How has that been for you to see this happening on a collective level with the insight that you had through your life experience?
Well, the thing is that basically the earth has its own resonance, and the earth is an evolved being. And we often forget that too, right? We forget that the earth has its own agenda of sorts, right? And we physically have been gifted, our bodies have been gifted by the earth. So our bodies belong to the earth, right? Everything that we have in terms of bones, in terms of muscle, in terms of mineral, in terms of blood, it's all been gifted to us by the earth. So the resonance of body and earth is kind of like together as one, let's say, which is always quite amusing when us human beings are then trying to, oh, let's heal the world, or let's heal the earth, or, you know, the earth needs us, it's crying, and you're like, well, hang on a second, how does that work? You know, because like literally without the earth, you are absolutely nothing. So as a result, the earth is evolving. The earth is the frequency of the earth. When I feel into the crystal core at the center of the earth, that has been becoming more and more potent for quite some time. And what is then ricocheting frequency out to the periphery of the earth has then had us human beings looking a little bit like you know, like birds that have been scattered from a tree or something. You know, it's been causing a lot of activity, and some of that.
You think maybe it's the mother kicking all of her kids out of the nest?
Well, it's a mother doing what the mother feels like she needs to do on a soul level, and it's us as you know, as kind of like parts of the mothership of Earth, right? Like if you can't divorce yourself from your body until you actually decide you've had enough and you vacate this plane altogether. So as long as you're in a body, your body belongs to the Earth. Yeah. And as long as your body's belonging to the Earth has the final say. You know what I mean?
I love your explanation. It makes me rethink the words "made in the image," you know, from the Bible.
Yes.
Whether that be a true, depending on whose interpretation, but whether that be you know, in respect to E.T. gods, plural, as they say that Elohim is a plural word, or if it's the one. You know, the one God is God. But yeah, so yeah, that's something that, even though I feel very organic, and I've always been very organic, my relationship with the earth, I guess my awareness with the earth has really picked up the last couple of months. But then again, a lot of things have. Have you noticed an acceleration of any type energetically over the last couple of months, particularly like say December?
Oh my God, yeah, it's been off the charts. I mean, first off, like I was saying to you earlier on, my mum passed what is now sort of 3 months now. And she was very, you know, she was incredibly close and a massive influence for me. I would not have had the words to describe what this experience has been like, because literally, Todd, I thought I would be. I knew that this would most probably happen, that my mum would pass before me. Right. But I thought when that happened, because of the level of closeness that was between us, I would literally be inconsolable and a heap on the ground. What then happened was a series of communication that has just been so incredibly profound, that what I am actually understanding is that on a soul level, there's a connectivity there that I've gained so much from. On the other side, I'm my inner child and my human is mourning the loss of this physical being. But on a soul level, there's almost like a rejoicing for how much freedom and power she's gained in being where she is now.
Wow.
And I would not have been able to put that in any kind of words before. So that on its own is one thing, you know. Yeah. And then because we've been in Grenada and she passed in Grenada, there's been a connectivity to the land here, because the land has been a big source of healing for me. And as a result, the land has been showing me things that I've never really been shown before. It's showing me the mechanics of, for example, how divinity expresses itself in physical form, you know, and the billions of entities that come together to create what we know as Earth. And those entities are working both individual and also as collective. I wouldn't have had any of this language, you know, before. So, and then you start to understand, really, when we're speaking about Earth being a living, breathing entity, the intricacy of what we're speaking of here.
Yeah.
and also the intricacy of us as beings as well. Because if you just take the human body, we can look at it from a cellular point of view, which then we're looking at, you know, the human body is comprised of what, 70 trillion cells, right? And I used to have that language in the work that I was doing, but basically what I'm starting to realize now is cellular structures are comprised of entities of consciousness and intelligence. Yeah. And that's what the earth has been showing. All of this languaging, like I'm saying to you, Todd, I didn't have before. Like 3 months before, like I didn't have any of this language.
Didn't have any of it.
No, and it's just because
you articulate it very well. It you know, takes me to things are as infinite outwardly as they are inwardly.
Exactly.
And then of course the replication of, you know, like for instance what I said earlier, you know, made in the image. Well, that's, you can attribute that to Mother Earth. You can also attribute it to, you know, other you know, the gods, God, whatever, goddess. But did you think, and I love your story too, because I think it speaks to what's happening to everybody. It just looks different. The experience is different. But do you think that there's something to be said for this expanded awareness and understanding coming, let's say at a greater level or more extreme level, while you're in the human aspect going through an extreme of loss, you know, and grief and you know, sadness? Do you feel like that there's any relation in terms of bringing the human into, you know, into equilibrium with our higher aspect, our soul, while we're still in the, you know, in the living body?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, basically, we're here to live out the directive of the soul. I mean, we might have different languages for that. Mm-hmm. You know, my language around soul feels very fluent. You know, some other person might say something completely different around that, but yet they're still living out the directive of their soul. Mm-hmm. You know, they might say gut instinct, or they might say, you know, whatever it is that people say when they're more earthbound, you know, but still, you know, they're living out the directive of the soul. And I feel like as the frequency of the earth itself is rising on a collective basis, and when I say that, I immediately am taken to the core of the earth, and that iron crystal core of the earth that has just been a pulsating entity that is now just like fully honed and crafted into a frequency level that is actually demanding that everything on the surface change.
She's doing the same thing you said about your grandmother.
Very much so.
She's refining herself, and then those things around her will either match or fall away and go to another like vibrational realm or something.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Did your grandmother ever talk about things that she learned in her life? You know, what I'm talking about really is like culturally or metaphysically, spiritually, things that she was taught, things that she heard, stories. I mean, you know, I know in the Caribbean and even in the southern U.S., there's some stuff passed down in regard to shape-shifting, in regard to shamans, in regard to, you know, what we would consider supernatural. But, you know, in my opinion, soul-oriented. Had she ever spoken about anything like that?
Not. She spoke the language of normality to me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So when I say that, she understood the power that we had as beings, as human beings. She understood her power. She understood that energetically, frequency levels, what we were holding is what we would literally create in our environment. So she was very, very conscious of that. But her spirituality was a bit hybrid. So it came from a lot of different places. She did have the more African sort of like Baptist of spirituality, which is more African based, not necessarily voodoo, which is a different form. But she had like I know in her younger years, she spoke very much around that and around the beating of the drums and how the drums are used to wake up spirit and all of those kind of things. She spoke a lot about that. But as she grew older, her spirituality was coming from soul. That's the only way to say it. It was coming from soul directive, and she was following her own path.
Yeah.
So she wasn't in any kind of group sect, if you see what I mean. She was just literally following her own inner voice and following her own path.
Right.
And she was following her own blueprint and her own template. And like literally that's the pathway that she showed me.
Wow.
Is that you're here to follow your blueprint, your template, and that's the only thing you can really do. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you, and going back to what I said earlier, see this expansion of consciousness, which I guess was normalcy for you, but seeing so many people, you know, even like what you were telling me at the beginning of the show about being in Grenada and how this looks one way on the surface as it was presented, but you actually are experiencing the gift that it is. I mean, looking at, you know, say on a macro level with the collective consciousness, I mean, are you surprised at all that the world's come to the place it has at this point?
Massively surprised.
Are you really?
I am. I mean, like literally everything's ground to a halt. You can't even get on a plane now without sort of like massive interrogation and then 14 days worth of quarantine in your house to meditate on the sort of like experience you had trying to get here. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, no, it's and I think basically we all are sort of creatures of comfort to a certain degree, in the sense of repetition is our comfort zone for humans, right? So like, you know, there's certain things that we deem as normal. Financial institutions, for better or for worse, we might like them or hate them, but they've been a normal staple part of our environment. Yeah. So then to see the whole financial district shut down was like, whoa, you know, because, you know, for sure that doesn't shut down just like that, you know. And to see where we're going technologically at the moment is also fascinating to me as well.
Yeah, it looks like what you said about Mother Earth is, you know, being presented to us.
Yeah, like on a certain...
I just keep seeing like a mother bird kicking all the babies out of the nest.
Well, on certain levels, we think we have a lot more say than we actually have. But like literally, if there's a resonant pulse going through your body, you don't really have a lot of say.
No. Do
you know what I mean? If your body belongs to the earth, then, you know, you're just playing out certain things without really, you might think, because that's the beauty of being human, the dichotomy of consciousness. So, you know, you think you have free will, and to some extent you might do. But if a pulse goes through you that affects the way that you're acting, how much free will are you having in that moment?
That's right.
You know?
That's right. You know? And maybe more of us are starting to realize that, you know, when these things happen, like you're talking about, since we've stepped away from projecting because we're more consciously living and taking things into ourselves. Or if you take the external out of it, and it's, you know, external people or circumstances or situations, then you take yourself out of it because you know you didn't do it. So now, yeah, maybe that's part of what we've got to come back to. You mentioned something earlier. You said that your work in vibrational frequency or vibrational, something like that. You remember?
Yeah, the light language piece. So the piece about vibrational language.
Vibrational language. Okay.
Yeah. So for me, you know, there's sound currents that we have. So for example, this conversation has a level of vibration to it, you know, the words that we're choosing to use. I mean, in the very short space of time we've been together, we probably said soul maybe about 50 times already. Yeah. So that starts to weave something, you know, your soul, how do you say it? Soulogy.
Oh, you got it right. Most people don't get it right.
So I mean, that's weaving its own thing. Yeah. On a vibrational level, the words that we choose to speak weaves a resonance into our energy field. What's occurring at the moment is that people are bringing forward language that isn't based in the structure that's been created on a human level. So when I say that, I mean light language, for example. light language and the term light language, even, the term light language is speaking about vibrational frequencies that are coming forward, that are bringing something into your consciousness and awareness, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's linear in nature. So it's not based, your conscious mind can't grab onto the individual words and make them mean anything.
Right. It's like it's like the space between the words.
Yeah, it is very much so.
And I think also, what you're saying too, it's a language or method of communication that brings code that we're unconscious to.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, it's almost like, I was thinking about this last night. When I went to bed last night and I connected, I started hearing this language, and I would call it a personal language, like somewhere between the fusion of the verbalization of the human aspect with that higher self. Mm-hmm. And I realized a couple things. One, I realized that it's been going on my whole life. And two, it was interesting because the pattern was similar to what you see in light language. There was a certain phrasing to it, but the thing that I noticed last night was, let's say there was a sentence of 10 words, backed by another sentence of 10 words, and so on. There would be 2 to 3 words from each sentence.
Okay.
There wasn't the absolute connectivity that you would have in, say, writing an essay or giving a speech. And I thought, wow, that's weird. And then I could kind of see geometry behind it. And then I lost it, which is like, but yeah. So talking to you, it brings me further code because I can see what you're saying. The other part of it too that I wanted to ask you about is vibration, as in, the throat chakra seems to be really, really front and center right now. Like we've had, you talked about the chakras earlier. There's been a lot of cleansing individually through the lower chakras as people have gained awareness and taken responsibility for their energy flow. Of course, the heart, the higher heart. But the throat chakra seems to be a meeting place or an expression, a place of expression, where all of these things are getting married together. And a big part of it to me, like you were talking about with the vibrational frequency of a conversation or of a voice or any type of expression like light language, it carries something that's I don't know, it's almost like you put all the words into a blender and mix it all up and you have a very consistent soup. You know what I mean? It's all the same color, and it's just I don't know, it's like a common thread that you can find anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, the throat chakra at the moment is creating, and I'm still being brought right back down to the center of the earth again. So I'm still being brought right back down to the center of the resonance of the earth that's pulsating. And also that resonance is then connecting on a universal level in a way that what is attracting is bringing in, different frequencies. My directive is very much earth connection. So you know how you have a lot of people that have got quite active language around star seeds and aliens and everything like that. And I really, I've got a lot of respect and a lot of love for all of that. But my soul directive is very much earth relationship, But basically, as you rightly said, is, the language of as above, so below. What's coming from the pulsating of the crystal at the center is then actually replicating and reflecting on a universal level. And then what you're having is that the languaging now is starting to reflect that, but the languaging is not the language of what we're used to. It's a different vibrational frequency. And so you're having a lot of people, I mean, even the phrase light language, I mean, I would say 5 years ago, I didn't have any kind of understanding of what light language looked like. I understood there was vibrational. I told you about my grandmother speaking in tongues and stuff. But my understanding of it in the way that I do now, as a vibrational frequency code, I didn't have any of that. You
But
know?
you just got that 5 years ago. So can you give an example of it? I mean, are you comfortable to share something with us? I mean, because I have a
Yeah,
feeling,
absolutely.
yeah, because I have a feeling that whatever you can express, although it may not be a human language, like an English language or whatever, will carry the point further. I think is
Okay.
that okay?
So I'm going to preempt this a little bit by letting you know how clumsy this felt at the start, right? Because when light language first started coming through, my ego kicked up some almighty shit. It was
Yeah.
like,
What was that like? I gotta hear that.
it was like basically, oh my God, you're going nuts. Oh my God, what is this bullshit that's coming out of your mouth? Oh my God, oh my God. I was
That's
like,
some
literally,
marvelous stuff.
it's like it just kept kick, and I was judging myself, and I had to really find powerful reflectors who were holding this frequency with solidity that I trusted, that I would go, oh, okay, so this is what it looks like when it's walking normal, because I didn't have that. And the thing with what light language was doing is it was coming out. I'd be walking down the street and my mouth would start moving, and there would be, and that's not necessarily stuff that we want to be doing, so so like literally it felt really clumsy, and now there's a kind of rhythm around it and a kind of acceptance around it. But I just wanted to preempt it with that, because there might be people who might be listening who this might be coming out for. And for some people that it feels really amazing, because they might have this language for it already. For others, myself included, clumsy. Okay, so just take a couple of deep breaths. Alla sotto conoscest Anna. Alla sotto conoscest Anna lete che nisht Anna. Rete che sono colosunt co oso. Lese kana a sankata kala takashint ala. Ele rinsint kala shinda. Oso kotono shent kana. Lese te kinishi li buit kana loko sunt oshene sele. Eshe ke na kasnt o se ke sholo kono. Eke rit kana jungo do la sete ke sholo. Rasa kasnt ana la keten konoshen. Este que le kili eze que sunt o solo conto koshala. Akasin kasnt a. Lesete que shete que nisete que nasint o. Ese le coso sht a la cassette que lete. Reste que na a sint a este que na ashen let kono o solo koshete que esten ka ana.
Wow, thank you. That was powerful. It feels organic. It feels. I can resonate more with. I love it all, but I can resonate more with that organic thing. You know, with the very rare times I do anything, which is mostly alone, uh, it feels very primordial.
Mm.
It feels like from like what I'm hearing from you, like from the creation of the earth, with a connection to everything. But it's like
Yeah,
very
and it's interesting because the mind will start to feel into it and take out the files that it knows to make associations. But and that's not a bad thing. But ultimately, there is nothing within that the conscious mind could grab onto and say, oh yeah, I know what that means. That means that, so this is where this new languaging pattern is coming in with the codes. It's coming in with codes that aren't necessarily linear in nature and aren't necessarily instantaneously recognized,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. She's amazing. What you mentioned, and you don't have to go any deeper than you want to, but I'm just curious. You mentioned you had a partner, and one of the things I find quite interesting in this transition, many people call ascension, is when two people are going through it together, and the pros and cons. Like they say, it's a mirror closest to you, and But do you have any comments on going through the last few years with a couple of years or whatever with a partner through this time where there's just been massive transformation? Of course, stemming from the individuals.
It's interesting because I've said to you that my soul directive is very much earth-based in nature. So my partner is very much earth-based in nature. So he's languaging, which is endlessly funny to me, because it's like there are times when I need to break it down in a way that that is understood, and that allows for consciousness to bring a sense of awareness and relatability to what's coming forward.
Right, I agree.
It also really tethers me to, for want of the better word, and this is in no way the normal. It tethers me to that because it basically means that it has to be in some way relatable. If it's not walking on planet Earth, then what are we doing here?
Right.
So and that's my soul directive. It's not every soul directive, but it's my soul directive to bring the frequency and root it at the center of the earth somehow,
right,
by the resonance that I'm holding.
Yeah.
And so the partner that I've not even the partner that I've chosen per se, I think the soul level frequencies of us matching each other has been almost like two sides of the same coin, like he's walking in the world and it's very much based in the world with the language of the world, and not really spiritual language per se, but very open and very generous in what I do. And then from my personal perspective, I can't be any other way. So it's kind of like, so it's like literally I'm obliged to walk this. So,
well, one thing about these couples that they among other things, they show it's all about the polarities, meeting in the middle. And that's really seems to be regardless of our individual missions, all of us, that seems to be the opportunity in each moment is to merge polarity, and bring duality into through the alchemical transformation into what, people call the Trinity. There's been a lot of talk about, and of course we know it's not uniform. There's variations as we're all different, but like with these couples that have an incarnated feminine and an incarnated masculine, there seems to be a lot of common characteristics. One of them being that the feminine tends to pull in the intuitive, kind of the guidance, and then the masculine kind of puts everything into motion. Do you have any thoughts on the dance of the feminine and the masculine in these last few years?
I think it's interesting that we're yin and yang, feminine, masculine ourselves as individuals. And I think that that's very important to play out as a point, because it replicates in doing. But what I've been seeing is for the masculine to develop the voice of the feminine, and for the feminine to develop the voice of the masculine.
Yes.
Because our patriarchal world previously wasn't it was trying to put the feminine into a box that was made by the masculine, and also to put the masculine in the box that was made by the feminine in a lot of ways,
That's a
and so we're coming into
no, go ahead. It's a lag. I wasn't interrupted.
We're coming into
yeah. I love what you said. So much, because as time has gone on, we saw this in Sedona in September my wife had channeled some information before we went on this trip to Sedona, and was talking about how we would be connecting with couples of a similar triad energy, Trinity energy. But also we would be connecting with androgynous individuals that carry the same energy. And of course it all went to just the way that it came in on the channel. But so that whole story, or that whole evolution of the masculine and the feminine, and then you have androgyny, and maybe that's the third energy. I don't know. Maybe it's one of them. But and what I'm getting at is the way you said that the feminine is learning to speak with the voice of the masculine. The masculine is learning to speak the voice of the feminine. But from an energetic standpoint, that comment says so much more. And it's very true, and it's an interesting thing to watch because of our identification or over identification with our gender, and with our history and with our story. As our awareness is expanded, these new blind spots come into view. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting to see, because I've talked to a lot of couples. I know 60 or 70 couples on the show, and there's always a difference. Even if they're same sex, or maybe we even know people that are non-romantic that carry the energy. But it's so interesting to see the makeup, because it's different with every one of them. But there is a certain something playing out where, I guess because we've gone through enough ego deaths that we've opened up the field of potential for more ego deaths to include over identification with gender, story.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Very interesting. So what kind of work do you do? Do you do anything online? Do you have anything that you prefer doing? Because you look like you have a lot of things in your tool belt.
Well, basically for me, everything is been about weaving the language of consciousness and awareness, So, the list that you spoke of previously of the different things that I've done is like literally just to give different it's almost like shining the light from different perspectives, like that. So that basically there's a kind of rounded perspective that you go forward with, and perspectives are never complete, are they? So so for me at the moment, it's very much about Soul Directive. I'm very interested in soul and business, particularly now, because I feel that the template that we've been given, and I say the template that we've been given, the template that Collective has been working to, has been a very masculine template of business.
Right.
And it's been not necessarily a template that is honoring a soul-based, heart-based, intimate-based, passionate-based business. You know what I mean? So what inevitably happens is that, a soul-based business is trying to run the masculine traditional template of business, and it doesn't fit, or it doesn't work, or it leads to burnout, or all of these things. We hear the languaging all the time, or you feel inadequate, or you feel like something's missing, or you feel like you're doing it wrong. And so for me to really speak very, very clearly and very, very directly into what it means to run a soul-sourced business, that's very much where my heart is at the moment.
It's a great subject. That's a great subject. I can relate to what you're saying. So there was like you said it earlier, that the patriarchal created a box and stuck the feminine in that one and the masculine in the other. I mean, so something to that effect. But you're right. And I used to talk about this as we were trying to build, different things at Soulogy, and how, because I had a long history in the corporate world, running a lot of businesses and did a lot of that type of work. So structuring things, implementing a plan, and so on. But every time I would go to do it, it would just crumble. So then, being with Morgan, the infusion of that feminine, let it flow kind of thing, which is very new and very, I think, for anyone, man or woman, who's been in that environment. How do you do something if you can't structure it in this way that we were presented our whole life?
Yes.
I think we're kind of there right now, and I don't think there's an owner's manual. I think we're actually working this out, and this is one of our offerings as the creators that we are to the universe, is this new integration, therefore new field of creation that's been made possible by the integration of these polarities, which means the death of a lot of stuff that was formidable in our incarnations, and then of course creating the space for that great unknown holy mother darkness womb, universal womb, where it's like, step in this space. I'm not giving you any promises. How deep is your faith? How much,
Yes.
how much do you how much of that do you bring to the table? Love, courage, wisdom, faith, gratitude, and this is to me really exciting, because I think it's readily available in the world. What your grandmother was teaching you, it's in the ethers, it's in the air, it's in the water, and I think there's a lot of people on the verge of really exploding and altering our reality in a way far beyond our comprehension. It's a true.
Absolutely, 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 absolutely. You said it. Absolutely. Because I feel, I feel that at the moment, the feminine needs to be integrated into business, but we need to speak very clearly into how uncomfortable all of this feels, right? Because sometimes it's like, as you say, comfort zones feel very good to humans, until it doesn't feel very good at all. But mostly it can feel very good. So then when you're talking about a structureless business,
Yeah.
or you're talking about a business that's made up of a series of missions, and each mission sometimes looks very different to the other. And that's the language I've had to develop around it.
Yeah.
Because previously I was looking for the language of what is the thing. And that language wasn't working, you know what I mean? Because that basically that language is like I was trying to tether myself to something that would make me feel comfortable for all of eternity.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work, right?
Yeah,
So like,
yeah, because that's a really good example. And even an example energetically of everything that's going on, or we're doing, or being asked to do. I don't know what the difference is anymore. But so, like back in the old days, you would make a 10-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan, even a 1-year plan. And now
yeah,
it's like, and this is the thing. This is the thing. It's and I'm going through it right now. I'm going through it deeply over the last 2-3 months, after I've already gone through it many, many times. But I'm learning, as everything else, at a deeper level. But one of the things I'm getting out of it is from the from the part of me that is that feminine, right? I recognize it in my past, even in the corporate world, that I had a certain intuitive ability, like a flowing ability within the structure of this patriarchal, right? But what I'm seeing now is a different type of intuition, or a part of it that I didn't know, that's become awakened um, through my own growth, and now there's a marriage trying to occur, right? Like the two serpents going up there, right? Um, that's blending the true masculine qualities,
yeah,
which you can find hints of in the old patriarchal, just like I could find a hint of my
yeah.
feminine intuition in the old patriarchal. But blending these two together is is pretty trippy. It's like, it's literally one day at a time. It's literally like scheduling shows more than 2 weeks maybe is the best we can do. Working on a project with a brother, and it just seems kind of weird. So we're trying to pick a date in the summer, and it's like, how do you do this? Well, I mean, and you kind of have to get past all of that chatter, which is really the result of our experience prior to this. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating because this whole this whole landscape that we're in with coronavirus and everything like that has actually eradicated plans. You know, it's like you make a plan, and then especially on a business level, and especially if it involves any kind of outward business, you know, like community coming together in any shape or form, and you're continuously having to change that because that's not what the landscape is right now. And I'm seeing, you know, I'm seeing just industries that are. My partner is in the, you know, the hospitality catering industry. He works for a company that has around about 1,500 bars, and I see them like, you know, it's interesting, you know, because it's like grappling with, okay, well, you know, 3 months from now, no, not 3 months, 6 months from now, no, not 6 months, you know, like that. It's just really grappling with where we are, and also what do you do with that sort of scale, because there's so many people involved, you know. So yeah, it's a very interesting landscape we're in. So when you asked me previously, am I surprised? I've not seen this in my lifetime. I don't think any of us have, you know. There have been world wars, obviously. So my partner's parents, for example, had experience of World War II. So they've got language of complete disruption of everything. But I've not seen disruption on this scale before. So it's really fascinating to me, you know?
Yeah. It is amazing. And you said something too. I want to make sure we cover this before we get out of here. But you were talking about how, and I'll just put it in my terms, how all that woo-woo or whatever isn't relevant unless it's brought into the human, into the body. And I think that if I look at what I've experienced, and especially when I say that, I'm talking about 99% of that is the last 3 weeks. You know what I mean? Because that's how it's working now. But one of the things, and then in regard to what you're talking about with business and soul, because there's been a lot of commentary on that in these lightworker communities, you know, the last few years. Like, well, how can you charge anything to, you know, I'm charging $300 an hour, or whatever the case is. But what I was getting at is what you said, and how that's playing out as we evolve this soul business template. And that is taking that feminine intuition and actually putting it into the body, being the business, right? Just as we would with the individual. And I think that's the part that's refining or adjusting, but that we're getting a feel for, because it can be things like, and at least in my experience, it can be things like that frequency, no matter how good the offer is, it's not our frequency. We respect it, we honor it, you know, we hear it, and we shake hands and part company, so to speak. It can be in a lot of different ways. So I've spent time the last couple of weeks thinking, from my feminine side, how do I, you know, it's kind of an analogy, I guess. So how do I convert that to the body, the human aspect being the business, and infusing that feminine intuition into a new way of doing what we call business? So I really, I'm a little fascinated that you brought this up, because I wouldn't have thought you would have, not to take anything away from you, but I'd like to talk about it again because I think it needs to be talked about.
Yeah, I mean, basically, and also sometimes when we're doing business, we forget that we're actually deeply in service, you know, and that's the long and the short of it. Who are we extending this out to? How is their life going to change by this? How are we going to be instruments or conduits for that transformation through divinity? You know, there's a lot of times when, as business owners, we create things with assumptions, and then we don't necessarily ask anybody anything, and then we put it out into the market, and then sometimes it works, and then sometimes it doesn't work. I feel that there's a very, very powerful way of actually asking humans what they want. You know what I mean? It's kind of like we get the download of what wants to create through us, what wants to express through us, and then we might sit with that, and we might put some kind of form to that, or some kind of framework to that, where, okay, I get what's going on here, and then we need to take it out into the market and talk to people about it. You know, we need to ask people, because what then happens is we start to fine tune and tweak and hone and change and pivot in a way that then serves. And that sometimes is a piece that I see missing a lot with people, you know. And then if what you're taking into the place that you're attempting to serve, they don't like it, then you know that you actually need to maybe park that for a little while, you know. And that's happened to me before. It's like I get really excited about something. It happened really recently. I came together in collaboration with someone, and I was so excited about the thing that we were creating. I thought, like, everybody needs this, you know what I mean? And then we took it out into the conversation piece with other people, and they're like, what are you talking about? And then I was like, okay, well, this is a huge educational process that we didn't even remotely anticipate. You know what I mean? And so it's things like that. It's bringing it down to soul service, and then what does that look like when it's walking in the world, you know?
I think that's the bottom line. So the service, the soul service aspect, which I think, you know, looking at it again from a gender-esque, you know, but would be like the like the mother energy. The mother energy is not going to. The mother energy is going to consider all parties involved. You know, so for instance, you know, over the years, whenever I'm making an appeal or whatever, I'll always say, regardless of my personal preferences, you really you can't fake that with the universe and say, you know, but I'm detaching. May this, you know, unfold in the best interest, you know, for all involved, you know, equilibrium. But I think that's what you're getting at. That just being conscious of your frequency, the business's frequency, and everyone's frequency, in consideration, in fairness, in equality. You know, that's formulating. That's the way I you know, kind of receive what you were talking about.
I can liken it to this. Everybody, you know, do you have plants in your house? Okay. You know how, because I've done this before, so this is not a judgment statement. It's only until I started to actually really understand that, oh, there's a connectivity with the plant. But you know how, like, some people water plants to death, and then other people don't water them at all? And it's a bit like the mother analogy. It's like trying to feed your child when your child's not hungry. You know, I feel that analogy applies 100% to business. There's a connectivity that you need to have with the thing that you're extending outwards on. And if that connectivity isn't there, I mean, you might stumble upon something and it might work, but really the connectivity is what makes things happen, you know?
Organic.
Yes,
organic is organic.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, because the patriarchal created a lot of stress, a lot of expectations, a lot of forced energetic situations and experiences, and therefore, you know, the repercussions of that, and here we are coming out of it. But yeah, I really resonate with what you're saying. It's and I think that's probably the difficult part. I know it is for me, although I'm doing pretty good with it. You know, the mind doesn't get too, you know, doesn't get to talk for too long. You know, but what it is, it's like I know what can happen. I know what I can create and do. But there's a part that's going, it's not right yet. And I'm going, okay. One of the things that a friend of mine brought to my attention about a year and a half ago was in that space of what you were talking about, like, oh my God, I got to go do this, right? And she said, Todd, what you're feeling is the alignment. You don't have to do anything. So I've spent a lot of time when I get a little bit freaked just going back, look, I know it's there. Yes, it's there. And just feel into the alignment. And like I normally will focus on whatever sounds I'm hearing because I'm in the body, and just kind of bathe in it, and then let it go. But it's a challenge, it's a challenge, but I think we're doing a great job. I think we're all doing a great job, and I'm really excited to see what the rest of this year is going to bring, even though we can't look more than a day or two out.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's just one more thing to be said here, that business is literally the university of the soul, and it took me a little while to understand that point. That like literally whatever you're bringing forward, especially in soul work, you're bringing forward for yourself first, and ultimately then you're extending or offering after. And so
exactly,
there are things that you just needed to hear that weren't needed to, you didn't need to extend, that kind of thing, which is what I got excited about with the collaboration, because after that collaboration I realized that I got so much out of that, but we just need to change the way that we approach it, because the way we were approaching it wasn't going to work.
And that's one thing for sure too, like going just to conclude with Mother Earth, and what you so brilliantly explained for the first part of the show, is she is our universe, and she's not going to support anything that's not
yes.
So whether it's whatever it is, and really whatever it is, all stems from an individual, because we are our own universe as well. But I mean, it's never them, it's always me, no matter what it is. So things are changing rapidly, but I could talk to you forever. We got another show in 17 minutes. We'll reach out to you, and because I think this subject is a really good subject. Not that we can talk about 20 other things, but I really think that it's something that I know I could use a conversation about, and I've got things to learn, and I'm convinced we all do. We're just trying to figure out how to do this thing.
I'm going to invite you, because I've got the Soul Source Business Summit coming up on the 7th of March. And right now, because I said that you've got to go and I also have to go, but I really want to invite you to be a speaker. Okay. So I'll reach out to Morgan and set some things up with that, because I think the conversation can be extended in that way, and that would be amazing.
I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All blessings to you and yours and your endeavors.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.